Hi and welcome to everybody. I'm here with Nik Ranger. Please, Nik, can you start the session off?
Thank you so much, Jason Barnard. Wonderful to be here. We are in for a massive treat here for Kalicube Summit. Over 2 focus days defining one question where we're really going to unpack the whole business methodology. We've got an amazing 28 speakers that are going to be sharing their experience and their understanding of AI search, assistive agents. They are SEO veterans, engineers, agency founders, and of course, Google insiders. So we are in for a massive treat. Of course, today we're going to be going through Jason Barnard's amazing framework. If anyone doesn't know who Jason Barnard is, I welcome you to come out from underneath the rock. Jason is the brand SERP guy. He is a founder and CEO of Kalicube, a digital agency and software company that specializes in brand SERPs and knowledge panel management. I'm so excited to talk to him today because we've been doing a lot of work together over the years, and I'm really excited because the findings and real client experiential work that we've done has a wonderful crossover. So I'm so excited to be able to chat today and open up the wonderful summit. Thank you so much, Jason, for being here, and let's kick off, right?
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so today is the geeky tech part and the SEO part, and tomorrow is the business part. But part of my whole thing today is the two are now not disassociable. You can't separate the geeky part from the business part. They have to live in harmony. And it's a realization that, you know, I've always thought that, but today I think that it's gone beyond what I feel is the right thing to do and is the only thing to do. Business can't live without the techie stuff in an agential world, and the techie stuff obviously doesn't mean anything if there's no business behind it to drive it, which is a great place to start. So I'm going to go through the Kalicube framework, and the Kalicube framework is this thing here. Sorry, the Kalicube Summit is this thing here. The Kalicube framework is my approach to all of this, and we have a lovely slide deck with myself and Nik Ranger, and we're doing the talk today, day 1, June 24th, 2026, from AEO to AAO, so answer engine optimization or assistive engine optimization to assistive agent optimization. And for me, that's the point. Agents are now playing the game. Agents are our clients. And we need to cater for the agents in the same way that we cater for humans. So we need to do assistive agent optimization. And when we do assistive agent optimization, we also do assistive engine optimization and search engine optimization. It's like a Russian doll that each one is inside the other. You start with SEO, you build on top of that with assistive engine optimization, where you're feeding the grounding, you're feeding the LLMs, you're making sure that the AI assistive engines can talk about, you know, recommend you and advocate for you. And then you move up another layer and you've got assistive agent optimization, which is more about convincing the agent and engaging and interacting with the agent, including when the agent is buying from you. And I find that super exciting.
And for anyone listening, I just want to add here, this is such an important conversation, because if there are chief digital officers listening, if there are SEO managers listening, anyone really in a decision-making capacity that is listening to this summit right now, this is what we're talking about. We are talking about being able to influence the agentic layer. These are the things that we can be able to understand about how things are being mechanized. So looking at mechanistic interpretability, looking at model steering, so that we can be able to start to peek out above your competitors. And let it be known right now that early adapters are always rewarded in any new framework and any new system. So this is something really important, because Jason's going to go through basically his entire gateway of how we can be able to start to unpack each of these layers and understand how to operationally think about what to do. Sorry, I just really
Brilliant.
want to add that context.
No, absolutely. That's what you're here for. It's to make sure that we're saying the right things, that I don't miss anything out, and that I don't confuse everybody. So thank you, Nick. That's exactly it. Today is day one, and we're going to walk through DSCRI, ARGDW. Might sound incredibly complicated, but we can just call it the AI engine pipeline. How you feed the engines. And the entire Kalicube framework is here in front of you. It looks a little bit complicated. People tell me it looks like the elemental table from chemistry. I kind of agree, but once you got your head around it, it's actually quite a simple explanation, visualization of what's happening. And I'm calling it AI era business engineering, because it's engineering your business to adapt to your digital world. Now, that came to me a few weeks ago because I haven't spoken to a client in the last 6 months where I haven't told them in some way that they need to change their business model. When the agent becomes your client, there's a fundamental shift in the way you run your business. It might be a big shift if you're a SaaS company. Eventually, 100% of your clients might be agents. If it's a coffee shop, it might be 5%. But the agent is going to be your client somewhere along the line in the coming years, and it's a good place to start right now to prepare for it. And think about, how is my business going to attract the agents and make sure they can do business with me? Super. Anything to say there, Nick?
Well, immediately when you're saying, change the business model, that immediately, us, begging questions like, what are the kinds of businesses you've been asking, that you've been working with that really need this absolutely pivotal shift? Because from my experience, the mechanisms that we look at is really looking at where they're operationally sitting, where their audience are interacting with their content and their visibility and the brand presence, and where we can be able to take that framework and really push certain areas where there are lapses in understanding, lapses or gaps in in this visibility to start to really target this a little bit further. But having like a complete business shift, I think, is a really different attitude towards taking it from more of a on the ground lens of what they already have captured versus where they need to reposition themselves. So right. What does that look like for a business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, because number one is don't panic. I'm not saying your whole business has to change, and I overstated it. If you're a coffee shop downstairs from my house, you might have 5% of your clients are agents in 10 years' time. So the coffee shop downstairs from me really doesn't have to worry about this very much, but the agents are going to be working within Google Maps, so there's a potential loss there. If you're a SaaS company, Dave Davis talks about it in one of the sessions, I think he said 80% of their clients are now agents. So there is an immense difference between a SaaS company that needs to think about it today and a coffee shop that needs to think about it in the coming years, and it's still only ever going to be 5%, 10%, whatever it is. So it's not change your business, it's think about how you're going to do business with agents in the coming years, and it doesn't necessarily have to be today, so don't panic. And the other point is, as you said, what you're already doing is getting you halfway there. The only difference between a human and an agent is the agent needs to be able to interact with your website or your MCP endpoint or your back office without the human intervention. And I'm speaking to Kasper Kalawowski, I think his name is, from Google, who talks about the agent in Chrome. And Chrome is going to have an agent inside it. And then you have Claude as an agent inside your browser. You have agents actually in more places today than we actually realize. And it's going to move quite quickly. But once again, the difference between having the technology and people letting the agent make the decision of the purchase is a big, big, big leap. There's a moment when us as human beings aren't going to let the agent make the decision. But we're going a little bit off topic, and that's my fault. The agents is one small part of this. How today do we deal particularly with assistive engines like ChatGPT and Google AI Mode and Perplexity, which is the right question for today?
Yeah, because agents are more fact retrievers, to be able to enrich a result for a particular user that might be doing one of those long tail searches, that when those long tail queries are broken down, they do lots of different actions from which an LLM will want to surface multi-rich variant answers to be able to provide that. So, when we're speaking about agents, we're thinking about, well, maybe it will go to a travel site, maybe it will go to a booking, a hotel site, maybe it will go to more experiential sites, maybe it'll go to public transport, or to experiential kind of things in a particular location, for instance. So from an agent perspective, they can be exceptionally useful for businesses to be able to think about how an agent would perceive their content and the way that it would be retrieved for that answer, but similarly how a user would be able to do it. So it's bi-directional in that sense. Yep. But yeah, let's go back to...
That's a brilliant point. Is today the agents are researching. We're handing over, we're delegating the research to them, and that's the big point today, is we've gone from simply delegating the 10 blue links and telling Google, give us the 10 blue links and I'll make the choice, to asking agents to go and do all the research that we were previously doing and give me the recommendation, what are the best solutions. So really important as a business, the machine judges you, but it doesn't have any skin in the game. It doesn't have any reason to favor you over somebody else. It reads what you give it and what the world says about you. It filters out the noise and hands back the most honest mirror your business will ever look into. This is, for me, the fundamental thing I've been working on the last 14 years with brand SERPs, AI resumes, is that is Google's and AI's opinion of the world's opinion of you. And it's often brutal, often difficult to swallow, but it's a very good place to start to improve how you're performing in these engines. And I've done this simplified version of the Kalicube framework with the Kalicube flywheel down there at the bottom. There's 10 gates, DSCRI, ARGDW, which are record and activate. So it's a really useful way of breaking this down into the bot part, where the bot comes and finds the content, the algorithmic part, where that content is used towards that idea of display, i.e. inside the engine, where you as a brand get visibility, where the user gets the answers, and then the one gate where you get the click and you've won the client, at which point we're going to serve OPIDC, which is going to be tomorrow. And then the whole point of this summit is the Kalicube flywheel, is how do you get that flywheel going where your business feeds back into the bot, into the algorithms, gets you more won clients, and then back into your business, and then push that round as a flywheel that gets faster and faster and bigger and bigger.
The Kalicube playbook.
Yes, exactly. Beautiful. And at the end, there's a QR code for an audit where you actually, it will spit out the Kalicube process, Kalicube framework strategy for your brand. And it's free. Amazing. Which is lovely.
So good.
So starting with record, which is, as I said, the bot. Now, a lot of people in SEO will talk about crawl and index. But Fabrice Canal, from being explained to me, it's actually discover, select, crawl, render, index. There are 5 stages. And I talked to Krishna Madhavan, who is from Bing as well, and Dawn Anderson and Jono Alderson about this particular part. On the right-hand side, on each of these slides, you will see a QR code that sends you to the article on Search Engine Land that I wrote about this particular part. So there are 19 articles on Search Engine Land that I wrote over 19 weeks that tell you everything you need to know as a practitioner, from DSCRI, ARGDW, OPIDC, and round again with the Kalicube flywheel. And each time we talk about an aspect, look down at the bottom left-hand corner and you'll see who I speak to at this conference about that particular aspect, and you can go and watch their session. They're out there as soon as this initial session has finished. So DSCRI, the bot, it's record. The bot needs to discover your content exists. There are multiple ways it can do that, and we go through that in the article. Then it needs to select it, and I think people often miss this point, is it finds your content through a link or through Index Now or through an MCP, potentially. But does it select it? And Fabrice Canal was saying that they discover, I think it was 90 billion spam web pages a day. That was stunned me. And what they have to do is filter out the ones that they're pretty sure are going to be either duplicates, sorry, I said spam, that's untrue. Duplicates, useless content, thin content that isn't going to be helpful, or spam, or the dark web, and not select it so they don't waste resources. So being selected is not a given. You get discovered, you get selected, then they need to crawl. So they need to send the crawler, the bot, into your website, into your web page. Then it needs to render. And Jono Alderson talks about that beautifully. All of the content that you've written, if it's behind a JavaScript rendering system, almost certainly lost to most of the bots most of the time. Google and Bing have been incredibly kind to us over the years by rendering that JavaScript and pulling it into the results. The new players on the block don't have the means, they don't have the technology, they don't have the money. And the resources needed to render are immense. So rendering is a huge question. And then indexing that Dawn Anderson talks about. How do you ensure that when that content is translated and put into the web index, it will be retrievable by the algorithms, which is the next stage. So that's DSCRI. That's how the bot finds your content, figures out what's in it, and puts it into the web index. Nick, anything to say there?
Oh, so much to say. I mean, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the wonderful minds that you've reached out to. Fabrice Canal from obviously Microsoft, who who is really a part of I think a lot of amazing aspects that we're seeing coming out of Microsoft, coming through big webmaster tools, and an absolute delight to talk to. Jono Alderson, Titan Industry for Technical SEO, someone that I love talking to all the time about, particularly rendering and schema and even just CDNs. One of my favorite talks, I think, has been his talk on Cloudflare. And of course, Dawn Anderson, who was quite literally going through a data science degree and getting distinctions at every single round. The people that you've sourced to be able to speak on this topic could not be more perfect to speak on this. And this is something that I'm seeing when I'm working with my clients. So, when you talk about the DSCRI, funnel, really what we're talking about is discovered, selected, crawled, rendered, and indexed. Even when you mentioned before about Fabrice Canal saying how much content gets crawled and discarded, that's something that I see with clients. For instance, even when crawled, so we did a fabulous a session together where we talked about a particular client that I can't say their name because I'm under NDA, but essentially when I crawled their platform and just replicated in the way that an SEO bot or AI bot, and I've got a full tool in GitHub that basically goes through 145 different bots that I have JSON that goes through and updates this consistently and tests each of the different pages that you add to it, the SEO and AI visibility of each of those URLs, and it goes pretty deep. So it's very, very helpful here. But when I ran it through this particular client, I saw 403 errors. I saw 429s, which is like too many requests being served to quite literally AI crawlers. A 429, which is essentially saying like it's hitting the server too frequently and it's forcing it to slow its crawl rate significantly. And across each of those, like essentially it wasn't even being able to access all of the main pages, because one of the things that I felt was happening when I looked further into that was some of the main pages that were accessed in frequency were pages that were they were expired event pages. And for context for this particular client, they are a major international booking platform. So they deal in booking flights, in booking hotels, booking experiences, being basically your concierge whenever you go on holiday, right? Or even wanting to explore your own country in a way that you can just be able to organize and use this platform. And it's a massive global platform, millions upon millions of users, and of course, billions of clicks. They're enterprise. So even for that particular client, I even found like something like 4 million redirects in there within the platform, where the crawler had to follow a chain rather than actually even land on the content. So this was, extremely fractured. So for even like their event pages that were being accessed, they were huge ones, like where there were like, K-pop artists that were coming out and, doing performances, but there was no way to be able to access them. So they were all expired. So a meta unavailable after index tag was so helpful here, just to be able to relegate that. But bringing back to your main point, if you're looking at the entire pipeline of how you're crawling, rendering, indexing, and you're having so many different gateway paths being blocked, the key thing here is to understand that an AI, an LLM using a IP or a bot that is crawling your site only is able to render HTML. So only server-side rendered content. So you want to make sure all of your critical assets, all of your important pages, and all of your expired pages are sort of put to one side, and all of your important pages are there front and center. All of the main metadata, the content, the tables, anything that you want to have a user be able to see and make a decision on whether they're going to select you, that's what you need to present to the large language model that is crawling your page. I don't mind whether it's Google or whatever, but that's really, really important.
But that's the huge difference. As I said, Google and Bing have been hugely generous to us over the years, and the LLMs can't be that generous today. And they also have to be very fast if they're getting the content in real time. And Krishna and Fabrice talk a lot about being kind and I talk about being empathetic to them. If you can understand their problems, and you've just described a whole host of problems that the bot might have, and you proactively solve those problems, they're always going to do you a favor. And the important part about this is it's mechanical. DSCRI is mechanical. So you can solve it by throwing resources at it, obviously the right resources. But if you fail at any of those gates, nothing happens afterwards. You have no hope for the rest of it. So this is table stakes. Get DSCRI wrong, you're not even in the game. Now, for discovery, we've actually talked a lot about this, and I got a bit distracted. I think we both did. Discovery, actually, how do you get your content out there? Inbound links will get it discovered. You can also use Index Now. Krishna talks a lot about that in the conversation I have with him, and you can read the article down in the right-hand corner. Selected, Jono talks about that, and I think the idea that we are automatically selected to be crawled as soon as we're discovered is a mistake that people make. That you have to earn that selection. It isn't a very difficult thing to do. It just has to be a quality page, as you said earlier on. But also remember, from the page before, i.e. the page that's sending the bot to that page, it has to be obvious that the content on the page itself is going to be worthwhile crawling, that it's worth spending the resources. So Corey talks a lot about that, about the cost of retrieval. And you need to be empathetic to Google. I hate to say that, and to Bing, is all of this costs them money. They're a business like you are. They don't want to spend money if they don't have to. The lower the cost of the retrieval for equivalent content, they'll go for that. And that's part of Corey's argument.
Which is, it's something that I think that's really helpful to keep in the back of the mind, especially when you're looking at what content that you're wanting to prioritize. And maybe this is where you're looking at the the entire universe of your site, right? If you have a massive site and you have loads of legacy content that for you might be really helpful, maybe there's some way that people can go back and access it, and it's great for legacy, understanding where things have gone. That might be helpful, but you have to make an executive decision of well, it might be internally still accessible for a user to be able to find it, but is this search relevant? Is this something that maybe we should sacrifice to really, put all of our current content, all of the things that are really operationally and commercially important for us into the centerfold? And I think that's a conversation that I think is a little bit sticky for a lot of people to have, particularly when having that. So I've got a question for you, Jason. From your experience, when you're looking at critical knowledge assets that are completely invisible to an engine's push layer, from your experience, what is the operational cost of leaving that discovery up to chance? Because there is
it's a great question,
true
actually.
Operational cost of that.
Well, I mean, an example of that, which is off-site, in fact, I published several papers on Zenodo. And until I put a link on my own website saying I've published a paper over there, they simply didn't get discovered. They didn't get discovered, obviously not selected, then they didn't get crawled. But once I published them on my website with a link saying, here is a paper on Zenodo about this topic that I've talked a lot about, they immediately got selected. And that's partly that the content around the link was relevant. The link text itself, the anchor text itself was helpful. And the machines, and you talked about knowledge earlier on, are interested in new knowledge about the entities they're trying to figure out. And I'm one of them, you're one of them, my company's one of them. So I was saying to it, here's some new information that you didn't have before. And the machine is incredibly keen to get that. So the discovered, selected, crawled was relatively easy for that particular case. But what I see as well is a lot of sites, and you've talked a lot about enterprise. The smaller sites don't need to worry so much about it because there's relatively less content. But I do see a lot of sites who have content that simply isn't easily accessible for the bots, and either doesn't get found or doesn't get crawled often enough. So whatever your content is, you need to think about what are you trying to push forwards most actively. And make sure that the knowledge content, which is my obsession at Kalicube, is always accessible and always digestible and always renderable. Now, delivering content through JavaScript, Jono talks about that. To a lot of bots now, it's essentially invisible. And to Google and Bing, it's an extra cost and it's an extra complexity that they can easily live without. So it's not don't use JavaScript to deliver content that's important to your audience, be it the bots or the users. And then indexing, which is what we talk about a great deal. Crawling and indexing was the way the SEO industry talks about it. Now it's discover, select, crawl, render, index. The indexing part, Dawn Anderson talks about that. How do you make sure that the content that you have put out there is stored in the index of Google and Bing in an efficient manner that will be easily accessible for the algorithms that we're going to be talking about next?
Awesome.
Which is what we're talking about now, which is the activate phase. So activate, I'm talking about the algorithms, the algorithmic trinity, and I talk about that with Corey Gabor, the large language models, search engines, the knowledge graphs. Those are the three underlying technologies of AI assistive engines. They need the LLM for intelligence, i.e. to have the conversation. They need the search engine for information, up-to-date information, niche information. And they need the knowledge graph in order to fact check, validation. So you have intelligence, information, validation. The LLM brings the intelligence, the search engine brings the information, the knowledge graph brings the validation. And those three run at annotation, recruitment, and grounding, as we'll soon see. And then display is the engine itself, where the results are shown to the user. And here we have gates as well. You can fail at any of these gates. And if you fail at the annotation gate, the recruitment doesn't work. If you fail at the recruitment gate, the grounding doesn't work. If you fail at the grounding gate, etc., etc. The only way you can get to one WON right at the end and get the client is if you've passed all of these gates, and there are 10 of them. Well, one is the 10th. I talked to Mike King about that, Nik Ranger, who's sitting in front of me, and Kevin Indig. So over those 3 sessions, you get part 5, the competitive gates inside rank and display. Because DSCRI was crawl index and ARGDW was rank and display. So we split it down into multiple parts, and Krishna talks about he breaks it down even further. The grounding stage becomes really complicated and really interesting with, in fact, with the conversation I had with you and the one I had with Krishna. It's super interesting. Highly recommend those 2 sessions. And talked to Corey about the LLM, the search engine, the knowledge graph. Now, I talk about this a lot. I was obsessed by knowledge graphs. I was obsessed by brand SERPs. LLMs came along, and what I saw was what I call the algorithmic trinity. Google owns them all. It owns Gemini, it owns the search engine, and it owns the knowledge graph, multiple knowledge graphs. No other big player owns all 3. They all have to borrow the technology in order to be able to function with that intelligence, information, and validation. And the problem for us, or the thing we need to bear in mind, is the algorithmic trinity is used for annotation. It's where all of the information is recruited and where the grounding happens, all of which has to happen before you get to display, which is the funnel. Annotation, I talked to Jano van Driel about this. Part 8 of the Search Engine Land series. Scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner to go and read that. Annotation, hugely important. Oh, Jono talks about this as well. And annotation is, way I explain it, when the machine puts the information in the index, it chunks it down and puts little sticky notes on it. And the little sticky notes say, this content is about ABC, the topics are E, F, G, the relationships of this, that, and the other, it's geosensitive, it's kid-friendly, it's evergreen, and so on and so forth. And Fabrice Canel told me, I gave him, I think, 24 possible labelings and 5 sections. He told me there are thousands, and of course there are. So the annotation is key because the recruitment, i.e. the content that's chosen by the 3 algorithms, the LLM, the knowledge graph, and the search engines, is selected not on the content itself, but by the little sticky labels. So you need to make sure that the bot, when it's putting the content in the index, can annotate incredibly in detail, correctly, and with confidence. And here's something that I talk about in the series, is confidence runs through this entire process. If the bot is confident, if the algorithm is confident, they're much more likely to go with you. And I was talking to, I actually can't remember who it was, but the agent, the key is confidence. The algorithm, it's confidence. So 2 things being equal, if it's more confident in you than it is in the competitor, it will select you. So just quick question for you, Nick. We were talking about content is king, then we said context is king, and now I'm saying confidence is king. And of course, it's all 3. But if you have content in the right context and the machines are confident, you've won the game.
Yeah, I mean, having a finite won the game, from my experience, doesn't really
help. Yes, no, sorry, it's over enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and SEO is always going to be like, well, it depends. But I love the word confidence, because from machine learning, we are more in the mindset that confidence can be a computational scoring pattern that we can be able to understand. And this is what I've learned working closely with Dan Petrovich, who is, in my mind, one of the most prolific researchers and testers of AI visibility, who has constructed tools that I use consistently. And the understanding that I've learned from working with him over the last 4 years, we look at the brand to entity to brands associations, where we're looking at the quite literally the confidence that the model has to be able to mechanistically say, what, like, if you were thinking about a brand, what top 10 entities do you associate that brand with? And then we're able to measure quite literally the tokenistic probability of that association from that brand to that entity, and so on and so forth. So from the entity back to the brand. So like if it's like, well, major booking platform, what are the top 10 brands that you associate with? We want to make sure that our client is in that list. So we look again at the tokenistic probability of like how in multimodal space, how close are they to one another? And with entities, they work in that kind of multidimensional space that can be mapped, that can be understood, and also importantly, that can be tracked. So for us, it's looking at the frequency of how often that over time they associate with one another, and also the rank, and not in a traditional sense, but the rank of from one token to the next. Is your brand mentioned first or second or third in its result, or is it not mentioned at all? So that basically gives it like a rank. So if it's like, well, what are the best? What's an easy one to use? Shoes. What are the best women's sports shoes? It may pick Nike. Nike may get a rank of 1, then Adidas, rank of 2, New Balance, rank of 3, Reebok, rank of 4, so on and so forth. So that's where we're looking at the tokenistic probabilities of that for its confidence in the model, because we can look at this from an ungrounded response. So looking at the AI's brain of what it understands from its pre-training model, what it understands about the world, to its grounded response of, okay, now it's using the web to do live lookups and checks to be able to enrich its result. How is that being looked at and measured? And over time, we track both of these ungrounded and grounded results to be able to understand this. But going back to the framework here.
Sorry, just when you say tokenistic probability, I think that's the kind of word that makes people's brains switch off. No offense, but it's the correct word. It's exactly the right word. I would say top of algorithmic mind. Which brand comes to mind for the algorithm? That's the term I'm using, and I'm trying to kind of use terms that make sense. So the idea is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, as the machine's going through its thought process, which are the brands most likely to be cited, i.e. which is it thinking about as it goes through? And obviously they don't think, but that's the story. It's like the sticky notes. They're not really sticky notes if anybody thought they were. It's a way of explaining it to try to keep it, what's the word, understandable. That said, lots of people say I'm completely not understandable. So I'm obviously not doing such a good job. Carry on, sorry.
Well, I think, it's, call a rose by any name, it still smells just as sweet, right? We're all wanting to understand and label and, conceptualize this for someone else, particularly in a non-technical layer. I didn't really introduce myself when I joined this, but I speak to a lot of C-suite, I speak to stakeholders, I speak to managers, and I also am a developer liaison. So for me, I intersect between, going in both worlds, speaking more about strategy and about, how one can be able to move the needle from a market share perspective and using traditional language versus using quite literally machine learning, data science, computer science terms to be able to understand this and be able to speak to, to engineering teams, speak to data teams, speak to development teams, and then translate what they say back to, back to C-suite. That's sort of like the intersection which I talk about this, and I do this for enterprise with Alibaba and Zendesk
So
and a lot of others. So just for context.
Basically what I'm hearing is stick around, because we're going to explain the geeky stuff for the geeky people and the C-level stuff, which is as a CEO, I want to know how well I'm performing in these machines, how popular I am with them, how much they're going to recommend me, because that's what I want to do, is get the clients through the door. And the thing about it is then how do I change that probability in my favor? Which the series started with Rand Fishkin talking about that 2% of results in LLMs are the same over 100 queries. I can't remember quite what it was, but he was basically saying it's so probabilistic, it's so messy and so unreliable that there isn't really anything to measure. And I was suggesting that you can put probability on your side. And part of this philosophically is, how can I make it so that the probability that the machine thinks of me each time it needs to find a brand is increased?
That's the whole aim of the game, right? I want to go back to the annotation layer, because I think there's such a rich,
keeping us on track.
Rich experience. Yeah, and of course, like, I know that you're working with clients day to day, and you're enriching your framework. So back to the annotation. The annotation is the gate which the AI layer assigns the semantic and the topical attributes to the content. There's already cleared the machine recording layer. So the distinction that matters between what a brand intends its content to be about and what the annotation determines is about. So those two things can diverge substantially, particularly for brands operating in complex or multi-category spaces. I love like the example, like years ago when you were going from a musician, because you're a wonderful musician, and worked in TV, and now you're in digital marketing, and even those sort of spaces. So maybe to bring back in like Jano's perspective and his point about clean structure, doing more than just like a pylon markup. From your experience, Jason, like, can you give us like an example of what that looks like in practice? Because I think like the instinct for a lot of practitioners in the room is to reach for things like schema, and be saying the underlying structure, but that might matter more. Like what's your experience of that?
No, I love it, and I love the point you make. Is what I'm trying to communicate is not necessarily what the machines understand, and it's at the annotation layer that becomes very obvious. But it's like that with humans. What I actually say to you is not necessarily what you understand. I'm not communicating the information in the way that allows you to understand. And we need to think about that as human beings, but also with the machines. And that misinterpretation is a huge danger to every business and every SEO. And Jano's point that I really love, I mean, he's known for being super geek on schema markup. He knows everything about schema markup.
Oh, can't wait
but
to
he actually says the key to schema markup is it forces you to think. And when you sit in front of a client, you say, okay, how are we going to build this schema markup? The discussions are really detailed. A lot of it is stuff like, I hadn't thought about that. Or what am I trying to communicate? So the nice thing about schema markup is it forces you to think about what you're trying to say, how you're saying it, and will the machine understand? And the answer is almost always, for the last one, no. But he also says, and Fabrice Canal has talked about this, schema markup is supporting evidence. It should be re-explaining what's already in the page. If it's not already in the page and it's not clear in the page, the schema markup isn't going to save you. The schema markup is a layer on top that gives it confidence in something it should already have understood from the page. So Jano's advice here, and what Fabrice Canal was saying, and what I would say, is use the schema markup as a way to formulate very clear in your own mind what you're trying to communicate. Check that you're actually saying all of this stuff on the page itself, and treat the schema markup as confirmation, and that it brings that additional confidence that we talked about earlier on. And yeah, the Jano is now a super fan of semantic HTML5 and tables and semantic triples and headings. And it is actually back to basics. It's all the HTML we should have been doing for years and years and years. Schema markup remains helpful and important, but it isn't the magic bullet that a lot of people, or some people, sorry, are perhaps believing. Supporting evidence that builds confidence. And this is the next part, which is claim frame proof. And I talked to Teodora Petkova about this. She's brilliant and delightful. And in fact, everybody that I talked to was brilliant and delightful. And the point about this was abduction. And abduction is a word that I'd never heard of until Claude told me. Abduction is what I would call reasoning and what's the word? Thinking outside the box. Some people think AI, or say AI can do abductive reasoning, and some people say it can't. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, do I think it can or do I think it can't? And actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it can or it can't. The thing is, it has no reason to do it for you. So abductive reasoning is the framing. And so I'm calling it the framing gap, i.e. you have your facts and you have the proof. And in between the two, you can say, well, I can take the claims that I've got, the facts that I've got, and I can frame them to my own advantage. The machine has no reason to frame anything for me. And an example that I used, I did an experiment a couple of years ago, online reputation management. I've never talked about it. But I wrote an article that said, I'm the world's expert in brand SERPs. I coined the term. I'm one of the leading experts in knowledge panels. Online reputation management is essentially managing the brand SERP with the knowledge panel. Therefore, I'm an expert in online reputation management. And within 3 or 4 weeks, the LLMs were saying that I was an expert in online reputation management when you asked who were the world's leaders. And the point about that is not that necessarily I'm an expert in online reputation management, but I did some framing. I took 2 claims, framed them together, pointed to the proof. The logic of it made sense to the machine, but the machine would never have thought of that itself. So framing is incredibly important, and that's brand narrative. That's what you're trying to communicate. But with machines, you have to be incredibly methodical about it. You have to think about... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to what you said. You know, when we were looking at this early on, I think large language models were extremely gullible, and this offered like a hotbed of fun testing and you know, seeing what could be able to be picked up and taken as a source of truth, which is again why I say like early adopters really benefit from this, because you can, you know, start to influence the agentic layer. And again, I'm using all of my terminology pretty purposefully. But that's the whole thing of like, well, Jason Barnard is the world's leading expert in knowledge graphs, knowledge panels. He's the brand SERP guy. These are well-established understandings because that is quite literally the way that you personally have framed it. But there are also additional third-party sources that say the same things, or at least references in a way that gives you weight and credibility. For a lot of the clients that we've been working with, we've been experimenting with this just the same, of saying like, okay, well, what are the top things that our client wants to be known for? What do we want to reinforce? This is influencing our PR campaigns. This is literally influencing the way that we write our press releases, write content that gets added to site. If someone is like asking like, oh, how do you, like, what is the bio for this? Like, what do you want to position your client for? This literally ends up in the briefs in the way that we're wanting to frame our client, because everything matters. If we are paying money to get our clients reference in the Wall Street Journal, into the Australian Financial Review, or any other major publication that has weight from a search engine or from a large language model, we want to be able to capitalize on that real estate. So we want to reinforce in these external places facts that we want it to understand about them. And in the early game, we could basically just be able to have on our own sites and small affiliate aggregators these truths, and that would be reinforced. We'd be able to see them and be like, oh, this is so easy, this is great. Now we're seeing this be developed in the same way that search engines, when over time they had more sophisticated algorithms that were developed. So now it's a little bit harder to be able to get these sources of truth, which is why the selection rate, and which is why the citation mining aspect of this, what sources are they using to be able to verify this, is so commercially important to be able to do this kinds of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just to be really clear, this isn't tricking the machine. I am a world expert in online reputation management, and the point is, online reputation management is essentially the brand cert. So this isn't a question of tricking the machine. It's a question of saying, I'm making a claim and I'm framing it to my advantage, to something that helps me, and I can prove it. And the sources that you talk about, the citations, it's really interesting with the Kalicube Pro database, is we're seeing that you can, or a particular website or a particular resource or a particular brand can be incredibly powerful for specific things. And that's a lot to do with entity relationships. For example, if I, on my own website, talk about Buwan Kuala, the TV series that I did, then I am a source of truth and a source of proof because my association with them is so close. And the claim frame proof, actually, if you come back to what we were saying with schema markup, is when you say to somebody, what are you claiming and why does it matter? And that's the frame. Why does it matter? Forces people to think about what they're saying, why they're saying it, and where they're trying to go with it. But I would reiterate, without proof, none of this stands up. And Brian Scudamore, when I talked to him for this series, talks about that exact same thing. I'm working with him on 1-800-GOT-JUNK, huge company, and he's saying, what proof do we need to bring to the fore in order to retain and maintain our leadership in the industry? And I think that's key. And you mentioned citations. I'm looking at the same thing, but calling it proof. So once again, we've got the terminology being used. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the clients I work with are like, they're Alibaba, they're Zendesk, they're iSelect, they're they like Mecca. These are the ones that I am allowed to talk about. Right. Again, there are many more that I can't, but for them, one would almost say like, oh, they're too big to worry about the way that they're positioned, the way that they've been seen. I disagree. I think particularly for industries that are wanting to reinforce and want to peak out above their players, I think that there's still a lot of competition in the way that they're being viewed and perceived, and even from a sentiment layer. What has been spoken about and what is the way that what is being reinforced as almost like a bias within the model. I think a lot of things can be able to be changed, and it's not a mechanism of manipulation, because Zendesk is an amazing platform that services millions of users globally. It's more that we're using the goodwill of the brands to be able to say to reputable publishers that, hey, we work with Zendesk and we are representative. Let's continue to write something more about Zendesk in this particular way, in this particular fashion. But there is a data-informed perspective on what we're doing, because everything is intentional, right? Everything has its reasons to be positioned in a particular way. This is just adding like an additional data context layer to that decision-making process, and the way that it gets perceived and the way that it gets framed. So that's more of what I'm coming at it from this perspective.
Right. Yeah. Sure. 100%.
Yeah.
So, claim frame proof, foundation of how we function at Kalicube, and once again, bringing out what it is you're trying to say, who you're trying to convince, and as you said, the case studies, and making sure that you're making the most of the credibility assets that you have. And then recruited. When do the algorithms choose you? When do the algorithms choose your content to use within their data set? In our session, we talked about search, knowledge graphs, and LLMs. Knowledge graphs and LLMs recruit for their data, for their training. And obviously, the recruitment of the content depends on what the engineers are deciding that they're currently training the model to improve upon. An example of that would be years ago, the number of people in the knowledge graph tripled overnight. And that was because the engineers wanted to improve the knowledge graph's understanding of people, specifically because people are very ambiguous. People's names are very ambiguous. That's a huge problem for Google. In fact, all the engines. Who is who when everybody shares names is a super big problem.
Barry Schwartz has this problem.
Yes, he does indeed.
Yeah.
And so the engineers are saying we need a particular data set. So the recruitment for those two will depend on what the engineers are trying to achieve. And the timeline for that is whenever they decide to update the model or make an update to the knowledge graph. And if you want to see the knowledge graph and track the updates, you can do that on Kalicube.pro. There's a knowledge graph tracking update system. And then search engines. For the recruitment for search engines, why would the search engine choose your content for grounding and display? So Nick, I know you've got a lot to say about that, but you say a lot of it in the session. Give us a brief outline of what you would say here.
Yeah, well, recruited is the gate at which the model selects from the available candidate pool for a given query, right? So the mechanism is different from classical ranking. What determines a brand gets selected as evidence for a query is the model's pre-existing association between the brands and the concept at the center of the query. So a lot of the research that we've done quantifies this as the primary bias. So the model's parametric opinion about a brand's to concepts relationship as expressed by a selection probability before the grounding concept is even introduced. So that selection rate optimization is a distinct discipline from the traditional ranking. Brands can hold a position 1 in organic search, but still carry a low primary bias score for a commercially critical query. Now, in a practical sense, what does that mean? Like, you could be ranking number 1, but maybe you have an article or a page that has, I don't know, like 4,000 words in its length. Like, it's extremely descriptive, it's structured, it's enriched with rich assets. Like, you know, it's a good page. It's a nice wrap-up page. But the selection rate is only, for this particular query, only taking a very, very small sample of maybe like 200 to 400 characters, who knows? I mean, when we tested this really, really varied in length. We didn't see any more than like 2,000 characters at any particular time being selected, retrieved, and used in a large language model result when we're testing this, right? So this was really important to us to be like, okay, well, what is it actually selecting for its results? And why is it maybe selecting this above any other part of this particular context within the article? So that was really, really interesting to us to think like, well, okay, if the model is selecting this, like, why is it selecting this? What about this particular framing in the way that this is constructed in this paragraph or sentence or construction is making this more attractive than other parts? And disambiguation carries a huge weight to this. I think in the way that we're structuring some of the content, we're thinking about how to be able to give the headline answer first rather than kind of burying it within the paragraph. We're thinking about how to split this out into something that is a lot more even like visually understood by a user, and just testing different things to see whether this has influence. But again, it's not an exact science, and there is I use the words mechanistic interpretability and model steering before, because quite literally there is a whole new frame of science within machine learning that is literally dedicated to understanding like why a large language model is even selecting from one word to the next, or what I referred to before as tokenistic probability of one word to the next. Like what is making its selection from that word? Because how we understand it in a commercial sense, if we're able to understand this better, then maybe we can write for humans and machines a little bit more efficiently, and maybe they'll be selected more over others, and we can be able to reduce the guess rate. But again, this is a really a difficult task that I don't think like has it has an answer. I think it's so. I think it's a very, very difficult thing, because the model also does things that we completely don't expect. Like within all means, like we've launched pages where we've been so critical in structuring the content in a particular way and enriching this, thinking like, okay, this will be selected, and this seems like more in the structure of which this particular site with this particular type of content and audience, this is what it likes and what it needs. It still does things that act in anomalies that we cannot model or reproduce. So it's still interesting to understand, but I think like the way in which we approach this is like with query fan out. And this is where, again, in our session, we were talking about the 7 million synthetic query fan outs to map the confidence distribution across the brand's full query space. So, that's a little bit from like, okay, well, where does it come from a research perspective of like what to select and what to choose, versus like, okay, well, now we've like selected a good article or a good blog post about a good landing page of what content to be able to produce on here, all the way to like what content actually is on here in the way that we're presenting it to users and a large language models. Like at every single decision-making process, we've tested this. And I think, well, look, the findings was like that high traffic queries, where the platform ranked well in organic search, did not always correspond to the queries where the model's primary bias was strong. So there was commercially valuable queries that clustered where the brand's organic position was solid, but the model selection probability was quite low. So that's what I mean.
Well, I mean, which brings us to the huge point that.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, finish. Please finish.
Yeah. I just want to make this last point. Like the gap between the search layer performance and the AI layer performance, and what it requires is a separate measures to diagnose and to separate that optimization to be able to like really close that gap. But they are very, very two distinct things. But for people listening to this, like I think a lot of people think hear words like, oh, we just need to chunk this. We just need to write for a large language model. We just need to present the answer all the way at the front, or create listicles, or create something that is tacky for like tactile for a large language model to be able to understand immediately and use it. It is a lot more harder than first when we were first looking at this, and there are so many mechanisms that look at this, but I still think that doing things that are representative of what content currently works on your site is probably the most important takeaway from all this. Find the content that works well, replicate this, and see about how it's seeing this. Because if you're replicating things that you've heard online about like listicles, for instance, Lily Ray, who's on Kalicube Summit, talks about this brilliantly. These things are being fingerprinted and demoted. So do things that are more relevant to your site and what works than things that you hear about that you're doing just purely for the idea of like doing a tick bucket checkbox for this. So I've covered a lot of grounds, but I think this helps to answer your the frame of in the way that it's recruited.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, and kind of a lot of what you're saying. I mean, Recruited is not just about ranking in a search engine. A LLM has very different needs. A knowledge graph has very different needs. So your content needs to be clear in terms of what it's communicating, how it's communicating, but also have an idea in your mind. Are you aiming for the LLM to use it? Are you aiming for the knowledge graph to use it? Are you aiming for the search engine to use it? Because they have different needs. Potentially all of them will be using it. And once you're recruited, obviously, then we're moving on to grounded. Now, Kevin talks about this brilliantly in his session. So the idea of grounding is to pull in a lot of different results. And with Jonah, we were talking about 200 different results. Only 4 get cited. The 200
4
results
get cited, I think, for four get cited for ChatGPT.
It's an example. It's an example.
Yeah.
So the actual citation, you get the link for, but it's actually looked at 200 different chunks, which Krishna confirms. And then the question is, you're being used for grounded to figure out, is this answer probably true, and can I trust it, and can I actually show it to the user? So the point of grounding is to try to mitigate from saying, for example, put rocks on your pizza. And for grounding, then my question, but I'm intrigued by that, is if your content's being used for grounding, to what extent is it actually useful to you as a business if it's not then being cited and your brand isn't being cited? And I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, to the point of what you were saying before about like 200 versus 4, when we've done tests of like query deserves grounding, which is something that Dan Petrovich and Mike King worked on collaboratively too. It was Dan's research, but it was Mike King's coining of the new phrase, which Dan really liked, query deserves grounding. Essentially, it's a classifier that has been trained to look at all the search queries and classify which ones have deserve grounding and are grounded by a large language model. And ChatGPT and Google Gemini are the 2 main ones that we've done the most research in. And I tweeted because when you said Jono had looked at 4, and I was like, 3 to 4 citations for and grounded results were used to be able to construct ChatGPT's answers versus anywhere of 10 to 11 to 15 for Google for an answer. And the scale of this is so much more for Google than it is for ChatGPT. And when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Google has an extraordinary amount more resources and a much more robust search engine that it can be able to use as part of its index. That makes sense. Whereas computational is much more expensive for OpenAI to be able to leverage the same kinds of mechanisms. So it's on rented space, and that has a huge difference in the inference layer with their results when they're producing this. So for us, thinking about how are we going to influence these models to be able to get the results coming into the fold, that has weight, because maybe it's a lot harder and a lot more competitive to be able to enter into OpenAI's grounded results than it is for Google Gemini's. Yeah. And I think even Gaston Riera shared a really, really great overview study even this morning in Australian time. He's an amazing technical SEO here in Australia. And it just shows the amount of Google AI results being used and captured by the market versus every other LLM. And the margin is just proportionate to
Sure.
of Google versus the next. So, like, this is why I think a lot of people think like, well, we're always going to be measuring ourselves to Google from an SEO lens, from an AI lens as well. But I think that's really, really helpful to understand of like, well, if we are getting cited, what are they citing and how much are they citing it from? Because then that now speaks to like how competitive is it for my results to be referenced versus my main competitor. Right. Yeah.
And that brings us to the point that the engine wants to say something. It's got an answer and it wants to say it, but it doesn't necessarily trust it, and it's going to hedge. And we were talking earlier on about third-party corroboration and proof. And for me, that's the big question here, is saying you need to look after your entire digital footprint. You need to make sure that the digital footprint, your digital footprint, everything that's said about you is consistent and clear over space and over time. And that the corroboration and the proof that is out there is clearly signposted by yourself from your entity and home website so that the machines can trust you. And at that grounding moment, there isn't the hedging, and that you get to the display phase, which will go through the 3 phases of the funnel from the Kalicube perspective, safe and sound, with the biggest possible probability of actually being cited. Because the point I was trying to make earlier on is that being used in the grounding isn't actually useful as a business. It's actually a waste of your resources. Being cited either with a link or as a brand and being recommended at the bottom of the funnel for the perfect click is the point of the business. So the grounding question is something I'm kind of working through, as it's really helpful to the machines. How helpful is it to us as a business? And that's an open question. And the point about displayed is it's the funnel. And when I looked at this, I thought, okay, we've got 15 gates, but only one of them is the actual funnel and the display moment when the machine is showing you to the user. So the entire process and the entire flywheel is all focused in on that one thing, display. Building from the bottom up. This is my favorite thing in the entire universe. The funnel has been flipped. People still come from the top down, awareness, consideration, decision. Machines think the other way around. They need to understand who you are, then they need to evaluate your credibility, and then they need to decide, am I going to advocate at the top of the funnel for this brand? And interestingly, from my perspective as a business, I would also say, actually, my priority is to get my brand name right and convert the people who are at the bottom of the funnel who are using my brand name. My next priority would be make sure that I'm beating the competition, and only then would I start to think, let's try and dominate the top of the funnel. So we start with understandability, and that's using your entity home and your entity home website as the central hub to build understandability. Tell your story. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you serve? And then link out to the proof. And I'll come back to proof and corroboration again and again and again and again throughout this entire summit, but also through all my articles. And the fundamental point of Kalicube Pro and Kalicube, and where I live my life, is the branded searches at the bottom of the funnel. When somebody's searching your brand name, you want to make sure that the AI engines say, yes, this is the best brand. Yes, they're wonderful. And they close the deal for you. For me, that's the priority number one. And that's where I always start.
Yeah, I think that's,
sorry.
I'm going back to what you were saying before about, at the point at which it's commercially relevant and important for us to, to be referenced, right? It's the most actionable for the room.
Yes.
It's, I think it's it's so important to understand not just like why you've been selected, but why you weren't. To be able to learn, iterate, experiment, and basically iterate for it, right? That's the whole process of optimization. That's the love of the game. It's the cool part about like what we do, right? Like for the client that I talk about in my session, like the rejection rates for OpenAI was like sitting around 50% across the test set. What was meaningful, what wasn't, what was used, and what the model extracted and what it didn't. And that was more interesting to us as to what it selected versus what it didn't, because in that, in its particular context, are teachable things about the way that it's servicing. So Google's, so that was for OpenAI, but like for Google, like the Google's grounding API confirmed that in every single case, the snippet extractor was semantically more relevant to the prompt than the whole page itself. The model isn't reading the page, it's only extracting a chunk and evaluating where that chunk stands on its own evidence for the query. So the content relied on the surrounding context for meaning. So whether it referenced the sensor referred to it or this, rather than naming the entity explicitly. And we use this in language all the time. Like I'm constantly, saying like it in reference to something, whereas like I could name like what I'm talking about. It found it actually is failing the grounding coherence test, even if the underlying content is correct and well contextualized within the article,
right?
Beyond just being well indexed.
No,
so,
100%. And coming back to what you started or you said right at the beginning is takeaway today is go and look at your Google Search Console and see what branded queries are coming through and make sure that the result for them is absolutely perfect, because you don't want to lose any of those bottom of funnel prospects and the clients who are searching around login or client support or do I get a refund, all those kind of questions. Those are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference to your bottom line the fastest. They're the easiest to fix. And the point for me is that every single mention of you all the way up the funnel, every time you appear in the search results or in the AI assistive engine results, is going to be better because the machine is more confident, it's going to have more clarity, it's going to explain your brand narrative the way that you wanted at top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. And I talked to Dixon Jones and Amelia Grodziewska, and I've forgotten how to say it, about all that. And then moving up the funnel.
Isn't she great? Isn't she brilliant?
She's wonderful.
Oh, she's
absolutely
so awesome. Yeah.
Moving up the funnel, once it's understood who you are, what you do, and who you serve, then you need to build what I call credibility. Lily Ray talks about EEAT. I added notability to that, and Jano Van Dreel added transparency, so we get neat. How do you make sure that the machines see you as the best solution in market to the problem compared to the competition, so that when somebody is making that consideration stage query, your name, your brand name is what I would call top of algorithmic mind, the first brand on the list, the first brand that the AI recommends when push comes to shove? So read the article, part 10 of the Search Engine Land series, bottom of the funnel to the top of the funnel. The AIDA principle was from 1896, and the funnel's been that way up for 130 years, and we've just flipped it. And then deliverability. The goal there is topical ownership, but you need the right content in the right format in the right places. And once again, it's not just your entity home website, it's across your digital footprint. The right content, the right format, the right places. We're multimodal. You mentioned that earlier on, Nick. You need the videos, you need the podcasts, you need the text, you need the images, and you need to place them on the platforms where the AI is drawing from, be it LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Medium, Substack, and obviously your own website. But the ultimate aim is to get topical ownership. And I talked to Koray Gabor about that. More than topical authority, ownership. Once again, top of algorithmic mind, at the top of the funnel, at the awareness stage when somebody is researching the topic. And in the Kalicube process, we argue understandability comes first, who you are, what you do, who you serve. Credibility comes second, are you the best? Deliverability comes third. Should or would the AI shout about you, about your topic? Do you dominate your topic? Are you seen to be the leader in your topic? And that's a logical order and a great way to build for machines.
Amazing.
This part now, search, assistive, and agents. I talked about this with Dave Davis. And the idea that search is going away is false. What's happening is assistive engines, are bringing more, or we're delegating more of the decision to them. We're saying, help me to decide. research for me. I'll delegate the research for you, to you come back to me with a suggestion or multiple suggestions, recommendations. And agentic mode is you decide for me, just go and do it. And here we've got a little diagram. I like the example of socks. I'll let you read that one, but socks is a great example. Is I personally buy always black socks, size 42 from Uniqlo. I would happily give that to an agent and it can go and buy my socks for me. Every 3 months, I need 10 pairs of socks, whatever it is. But my partner collects socks. So the whole point of buying socks is search mode window shopping. So for the same product, two people have very different places on the delegation spectrum here. So the point is with search, you're going to delegate the list of 10 links. In assistive mode, you're delegating the research and the assessment to give me the recommendation. In agentic mode, you're delegating the whole lot. And importantly, you can flip between all of these different engines in the same journey. And the example would be potentially holiday. I would talk to an assistive engine to get myself to a recommendation of where I might want to go. It knows me well. It will get me to the point where it knows that I love the sun and I love palm trees and I love beaches, so it's going to suggest Mauritius. But then I would probably go to search to research the hotels because I want the fun of figuring out which hotel I want to stay in and I want to have a look at the details of it. I enjoy that part. And then potentially I'd ask an agent to book it because I know the dates and I know the hotel and I can just say to an agent, go book it. This is where we're going. And the three will live not perhaps in harmony, but side by side. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think this is really already starting to be positioned. I think the only real barrier to it becoming widely adopted is just users. Users are slow to adoption with this. Yes. Because I think that with a lot of interfaces, and also just like with the wider web and accessibility, there are a lot of barriers to be able to have this done well and at scale. I think where we've seen this in practice is like with OneBox, where we've seen this in the travel space, where if you're wanting to book a flight, you will have basically the entire purchasing decision be decided for you within Google SERP. And when only at the point of purchase do you actually get taken back to the original site. So, think about your Agodas, your Skyscanners, your Booking.coms, your Momodas. A lot of those are losing out from visibility and from clicks because Google's owning this in the SERP. I think the AI agents that are now going and servicing this are essentially like another additional layer that is acting in the same kind of fashion, but just in a very different methodology because it has the relaxed, vibe of it. It has the usership to be able to leverage this. So this is what, Cindy Crum, who's been an amazing, thought leader in this space for decades, has been speaking about like this multimodal way of wanting to present your content and your information in a multivariate different ways, so that you can be able to surface in traditional pathways of all the way to the decision point, to the consideration phase, to the influencing phase of, okay, well, maybe I might want to go to Mauritius, or maybe I want to go to, oh my gosh, maybe I want to go to Nice, because these two places are beachside. And that might be just more of like my vibe. And maybe I've been influenced to be able to go and spend some time and maybe go there, rent a car, and go all the way up through the French Alps. Wonderful, wonderful journey, and decision. But there are so many different things that are influencing the purchasing decision that I think we need to be considerate of to be able to take this. So, I mean, yes, this is absolutely happening, but I think that this is why why through, gates 1 through to 6 all the way, we're talking so much about accessibility, and we're talking about, having your key critical assets be there, but also in the surprising light of what content is there and what content is there to be surfaced. So that's the way that I think we need to think about resourcing the content tomorrow, because not everything can be text-based, and the where you cut corners and cheap out, I think will, are very easily fingerprinted and just demoted. So you may as well spend that time creating things that things of substance rather than things of volume.
Yep, beautifully said. And I mean, one point there is accessibility, super important, always has been. I think it's often overlooked, and now with agents in particular, accessibility is becoming table stakes. It was always important, but today it's absolutely unavoidable. So go and get your accessibility research glasses on and figure that out, because that's going to be a huge lift for you. And now on to one where we win the client. So we've got the perfect click in assistive engines. We've got the imperfect click in traditional search, or we've got the agentic click in assistive agents. And a quick explanation, the imperfect click, the idea that you have 10 links, the user chooses. It's imperfect. The perfect click is the assistive engine says, this is the solution. This is the perfect click. And Microsoft Bing internally call it the perfect click, and that's what they're aiming for. They're aiming to get the user all the way down the funnel to the solution to their problem, where they click through and the solution is absolutely what they needed and they convert. And then the agential click, where the agent makes the purchase. And the interesting thing about agents is you don't see the funnel. You don't see its process as it comes down the funnel. You don't see the negotiation, although you can measure it. And we talk about that, the micro measurements that you simply get with Neil Murty from Google, is that with the imperfect click in search, you can measure your ranking, you can measure the clicks, you can measure the engagement of the user. With the perfect click in assistive engines, you only get that last point of measurement that's reliable, i.e. the click. And you need a macro approach, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So moving from a micro measurement in search to a macro measurement of your success in assistive is the approach we're taking at Kalicube. And ironically, then you get to the bottom with the agent, and the funnel is unmeasurable, it's totally opaque. But the moment of purchase, the moment of engagement, the negotiation is measurable even more exactly than the search measurement was in the first place. So the point of this is I've won the client. I've managed to get the engine to recommend me above my competition. The person's come through to my website. I'm going to convert them. I'm then going to have to serve them, which is the subject of tomorrow, either through the imperfect click in search, the perfect click in assistive engines, or the agentic click in assistive agents. That for me is the key, and something that I in the past have been guilty of not paying enough attention to. The whole point of this is business. It's to win the client.
So one is a gate where the machine phase delivers a commercial signal. And the 3 click types that you described, the imperfect, the perfect, and agentic, they essentially represent the 3 revenue mechanics. And for each of those 3 revenue mechanics, they require like 3 very different attribution frameworks to be able to measure. Wonderful. I think with day 2, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead with day 2. Looking forward to day 2.
Oh, day 2 is going to be amazing. Already day 1 is amazing. Day 2 is going to be incredible as well. That's going to be covering the OPIDC and the flywheel. I think, I would love to say, like, before we even think about closing today, the one feeds back into the flywheel and the flywheel feeds back into the discovery. For a brand operating at a platform scale with again, I always think of that about things of like, what if it's, thousands, what if it's millions of euros, but what is the minimum viable flywheel from your experience? Like, what has to be in place before the loop can actually start to compound?
Wonderful question. Actually, for a personal brand, the personal website can be very small. because the off website presence can be very big. So I can be on YouTube, I can be on LinkedIn, I can be on Medium, I can have articles written about me, and I can use that to create the flywheel. So my own website doesn't necessarily need to be very big from a personal brand perspective. And then the size of the website for the Kalicube flywheel is important, but in fact, it's written way too small for anybody to read there. It's pushing that content back to discovery, back to the record phase through first, second, and third-party websites, published by the brand itself, the brand's clients, and independents. So your aim is to get a natural and meaningful spread of what you say yourself on your own properties, what your clients and your partners say about you on their properties, and what you say they've said on your own properties, and the partnerships you can make on different platforms. And then thirdly, the truly independent comments and content from the PR that you do, the journalists, the academics, the business associations. So you always need to be thinking about, is it first, second, or third party content? Is it me saying it? Is it my clients and my partners saying it? Or is it truly independent? And if you can get that right, that flywheel flies, as it were. And Barry Schwartz and Danny Goodwin, we were talking about both the series and the state of the industry today. And fundamentally, what I'm saying is AI is a sales force that you never hired. It's selling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And if you brief it, if you train it, if you train all of them, they'll sell for you. They'll convert your bottom of the funnel users who are searching your brand name. They'll recommend you over and above the competition in the middle of the funnel, and they will advocate for you at the top of the funnel. And if you can get that right, not only do you start this flywheel going, but you move forwards with your business, which helps you, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, with the single source of truth and the codified part of OPIDC. You will then be able to also create consistent, clear content across your entire digital footprint, which will feed your digital strategy, standing where your audience is looking, demonstrating them that you have the right solution for them, that you are the correct solution, and inviting them down the funnel. And you win on both sides. Where your audience is looking, where your audience is buying, without even thinking about search and AI, and then in the search and AI alongside it. And
amazing.
Winning the recommendation was never the finish line. What do you do after one is exactly what feeds the pipeline we just walked, and that's tomorrow, which is going to be absolutely delightful. And if you want a free AI authority audit, scan that code. It's a free competitive audit of how AI engines understand your brand today, estimation of how much money you're leaving on the table, and you get a bespoke Kalicube process strategy and AI instructions for free. Please go ahead. I invite you to take that. It's something I'm really impressed by what we've managed to build there. It's the Kalicube process, which is all in my brain, codified. And it can actually, because it knows you, spit out your specific strategy based on the codified version of what I've just explained today with Nik. So thank you very much. Nik, that was absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to say that tomorrow we're with, Bob Gentle, who is just as bold as I am, talking about OPIDC codified in the Kalicube flywheel. That's going to be absolutely lovely. And right now we can say thank you to everybody. All of the different sessions are now going to go live on the website. You can watch them for the next 7 days within our website with your login. After 7 days, we'll make them public so that anybody can watch them. We want to share, and we can just say goodbye. Thank you, Nik. It's 3 o'clock in the morning for you now.
Yeah, just about. But I just want to say thank you so much, Jason, for having me. What you walked through this is the machine and AI activation architecture that essentially governs whether a brand is even in play where an AI system responds to a query. The client work that I've tried to really reference as part of like what this looks like working with somebody is from just one platform, but the failure patterns, they repeat. Like the recording layer access problems, they're at scale. The rendering failures that represent site architecture to machine consumers, the annotation gaps between what the brand covers and even what the model knows it covers, and the rejection rate at which the grounding layer is measurable and accessible but invisible to teams that are only watching search metrics. That's happening right now. So the speakers that you're going to hear for the rest of day 1 and going into day 2 are going to offer such a wonderful wealth and depth of each one of those specific layers. A wonderful through line to carry of all of this is the framework that Jason's just walked us through today with his gates from 1 to 10. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, join the 3,400 subscribers of Jason's Kalicube YouTube channel. It's a phenomenal resource. And like and subscribe if you're liking what you're seeing. And of course, reach out to Jason, use the QR code, find the link because it's an amazing free resource for you to be able to try out today. And I just want to say thank you so much. If you want to find me, you can reach out to me at Dejan AI or Dejan Marketing, or through just me with just Nik Ranger on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for having me, Jason. It was phenomenal to be able to have this wonderful live session for day 1 of Kalicube Summit.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. I just calculated in my little brain. You've got 7 hours of watching ahead of you and then another 7 hours tomorrow. And if you hang out for the session tomorrow morning, that's 8.5 hours. Thank you so much. See you soon. Enjoy.
Bon appetit. Bye.